Long before castles, kingdoms, and great cities filled the maps of Europe, small wooden villages stood quietly along the cold shores of the north. These were the homes of the Vikings. To many people today, the Vikings are remembered as fearless warriors and sailors who crossed vast oceans in their longships. But most Vikings did not spend their lives in battle. They lived as farmers, fishermen, builders, and families who worked together to survive in a rugged and beautiful land. Tonight, we step inside one of those villages. We will walk along the narrow paths between wooden houses. We will see how people lived, worked, and prepared for the long northern winters. And we will discover the quiet rhythm of everyday life in a Viking community many centuries ago. This journey will move slowly and peacefully, allowing you to relax while learning about the world of the Vikings. So settle in, take a deep breath, and allow the story to unfold. Tonight, we travel far into the past, across the cold seas of Scandinavia, into the calm and quiet world of a Viking village.
Arrival at the village. The sea is calm tonight. Along the northern coast of Scandinavia, gentle waves move slowly toward the shore. The cold air carries the quiet scent of salt and pine trees from the nearby forests. Above the water, the sky is wide and pale, slowly changing as the day begins to fade into evening. In the distance, a small settlement appears beside the shore. This is a Viking village. At first, it is only a few shapes along the coastline. Low wooden houses stand close together near the water. Thin lines of smoke rise from the roofs and drift softly into the evening air. The smoke comes from the fires burning inside the homes. These fires are the center of daily life. They give warmth during the cold nights of the north. They provide light during the dark winter months. And they are the place where families gather at the end of the day. The village itself is not large. Most Viking settlements were small communities where a few dozen families lived together. These villages were often built near rivers, along the coast, or beside deep fjords where ships could safely rest. For the people who lived here, the sea was very important. It provided fish for food. It allowed travel and trade with other lands. And sometimes it carried ships far across distant waters. As we move closer to the village, the ground becomes softer beneath our feet. Small grasses grow between patches of stone. Wildflowers move gently in the cool wind coming from the sea. The air is fresh and quiet. Far above the water, seabirds circle slowly through the sky. Along the shore, several wooden boats rest on the sand. These boats are long and narrow, carefully built from strong wooden planks. Some are small fishing boats used by the villagers each day. Others are larger vessels built for longer journeys across rivers and oceans. But tonight, the boats are still. They rest quietly beside the water, waiting for another day. As we continue walking toward the village, the sounds of daily life begin to appear. A door opens somewhere in the distance. A voice speaks quietly inside one of the houses. And from another home comes the soft glow of firelight shining through a small opening in the wall. Life in a Viking village followed the rhythm of nature. People woke early with the sunrise and worked throughout the day. They gathered wood, cared for animals, repaired tools, and prepared food that would help them survive the long winters of the north. Now, as evening arrives, the village slowly begins to grow quiet. A narrow path runs between the houses. The ground has been shaped by many footsteps over many years. On each side of the path stand the buildings that form the heart of the settlement. These homes are called Longhouses.
A longhouse is the traditional home of a Viking family. It is large and strong, built to protect the people inside from wind, rain, and snow. The walls are made from wood and earth. Thick wooden beams support the roof above. The roof itself is often covered with straw or layers of grass and soil, helping keep warmth inside during the cold months. From the outside, the longhouses appear simple. But inside them, entire families live together. In the center of each longhouse is a fire that burns throughout the day and night. Around this fire, meals are cooked, tools are repaired, and stories are shared. The fire is the heart of the home. As we pass one of the houses, warm light flickers gently through the doorway. The glow of the fire moves softly across the wooden walls. Inside, a family may be finishing their evening meal or preparing for the night ahead. Beyond the houses, small wooden fences surround simple animal pens. Inside these enclosures stand sheep and goats resting quietly. Animals were an important part of Viking life. They provided milk, wool, meat, and leather that could be used for clothing and tools. Taking care of these animals was part of the daily work shared by the whole village. Now the sky continues to grow darker. The cool wind from the sea becomes slightly stronger. Above the rooftops, the first stars begin to appear. A quiet calm settles over the settlement. Unlike the stories of Viking warriors sailing across distant oceans, most days in a Viking village were peaceful. Life here moved slowly. People worked together, helped one another, and followed the steady rhythm of the seasons. Spring was the time for planting crops. Summer brought fishing and travel across the sea. Autumn was the season for gathering food and preparing for winter. And winter itself was long, cold, and dark. During those months, families spent much of their time inside their homes. They repaired tools, wove clothing, and shared stories beside the warm fire. Stories were very important to Viking culture. They carried memories of the past and told of gods, heroes, and distant lands. On nights like this one, the village might gather inside the glow of a longhouse while someone told one of these ancient tales. Outside, the village would remain quiet under the northern sky. The boats would rest on the shore. The animals would sleep inside their shelters. And the cold wind would move gently across the roofs of the houses. Standing here at the edge of the village, we begin to understand how closely these people lived with the natural world around them. The forests gave them wood. The fields gave them food. And the sea connected them to lands far beyond the horizon. This small village is only one of many that once existed along the coasts of Scandinavia. Each one had its own families, its own traditions, and its own stories. And together, these villages formed the foundation of the Viking world. As we continue our journey, we will begin to explore the landscape that shaped their lives. Because to truly understand the Vikings, we must first understand the land they called home. A land of forests, mountains, and long northern winters. A land that shaped the people who lived here for centuries.
The land of the North. To understand the people of a Viking village, it is important to first understand the land around them. The world of the Vikings was shaped by nature. Long before villages were built and long ships sailed across the sea, the land itself created the conditions that would influence how people lived. This land was Scandinavia. It is the region that today includes Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. During the Viking Age, this northern part of Europe was a place of dramatic landscapes and powerful natural forces. Tall mountains rose sharply above deep valleys. Thick forests stretched for many miles across the countryside. Cold rivers flowed from high mountains down toward the sea. And along the coast, the land opened into long, narrow waterways known as fjords. These fjords were created thousands of years earlier by slow-moving glaciers that carved deep paths through the mountains. When the ice melted, the sea filled these valleys, creating long arms of water that reached far into the land. For the people who lived here, the fjords became natural highways. Traveling across mountains was difficult and slow, but traveling by water was often easier. Small boats and ships could move quietly along these sheltered waterways,
connecting villages that might otherwise have been separated by rugged terrain. The sea, therefore, was not only a source of food, it was also a road. Many Viking villages were built close to these waters. The people living there could fish, trade with nearby settlements, and travel along the coast when necessary. But while the sea offered opportunity, the land itself was not always easy to live in. Much of Scandinavia was rocky and uneven. Large areas were covered in dense forest. The soil was often thin and difficult to farm. This meant that Viking communities had to work carefully with the resources they had. Fields were usually small. Farmers cleared sections of land by cutting trees and removing stones from the soil. Over time, these small clearings became farmland where barley, oats, and other crops could grow. But farming in the north required patience. The growing season was short. Spring arrived later than in warmer regions of Europe, and autumn often came quickly, bringing colder weather and shorter days. Because of this, every harvest was important. Villagers worked hard during the warmer months to gather enough food for the long winter ahead. Winter in the Viking world was very different from summer. The days became much shorter. In some northern areas, sunlight appeared for only a few hours each day. Snow covered the ground. Cold winds moved down from the mountains. The sea itself sometimes froze near the shore. For families living in a village, winter was a time for staying close to home. Most outdoor work slowed or stopped. People spent more time inside their longhouses, where the central fire provided warmth and light. But winter was not only a time of difficulty, it was also a time of storytelling, craftsmanship, and quiet reflection. Inside the longhouse, people repaired tools, carved wood, wove cloth, and shared stories that had been passed down through generations. Outside, the land rested beneath snow and frost. When spring finally returned, the landscape would begin to change again. The forests that covered much of Scandinavia were an important part of Viking life. These forests were filled with tall pine trees, birch trees, and oak. The wood from these trees provided nearly everything a village needed. It was used to build houses, it was used to make tools, furniture, carts, and fences. Most importantly, it was used to build ships. The famous Viking longships were crafted from strong and flexible wood taken from these forests. Shipbuilders selected trees carefully. Each piece of wood had to be shaped and fitted together with great skill. The result was a vessel that was light, fast, and strong enough to cross open seas. Without the forests, these ships would never have existed. And without these ships, the Viking Age itself might have been very different. The forests also provided animals for hunting. Deer moved quietly through the trees. Wild boar searched for food along the forest floor. Birds nested in the branches above. Hunting was another important activity for Viking communities. It provided meat for food and fur for clothing during cold winters. Some animals were also valued for trade. Furs from northern forests were highly prized in distant markets. In this way, the natural world around the village supported daily life in many different ways. But the landscape was not always calm or predictable. Storms sometimes moved across the northern seas. Strong winds could push waves against the rocky shore. Snowstorms could arrive suddenly during winter. These forces of nature reminded people that the world around them was powerful and sometimes dangerous. Because of this, Vikings developed a deep respect for nature. Their stories and beliefs often reflected the landscapes they lived in. Mountains, forests, and seas all appeared in their myths and legends. The gods of your stories were often connected to natural forces. Thunder, storms, the sea, and the changing seasons all played important roles in their understanding of the world. Even the sky above Scandinavia had its own unique beauty. During winter nights, the northern lights sometimes appeared across the dark sky. Green and silver waves of light moved slowly above the land. For people living many centuries ago, the sight must have been mysterious and powerful. Without modern explanations, many believed these lights were connected to the world of spirits and gods. For a Viking village, the landscape was not something distant or separate. It was part of everyday life. The land shaped how people built their homes. It determined what crops they could grow. It influenced how they traveled and where they traded. It even shaped their stories and beliefs. The mountains offered protection but also isolation. The forests provided resources but required hard work to manage. And the sea connected the people of Scandinavia to the wider world. Standing near the edge of a Viking village, it would be easy to see how closely people lived with their environment. The houses were built from the wood of nearby trees. The fields stretched into small clearings between rocks and forest. Boats rested along the shore,
ready to return to the water when the next journey began. Everything in the village depended on the land and sea around it. This close relationship with nature created a way of life that valued strength, patience, and cooperation. Families worked together to prepare for each season. Neighbors helped one another during difficult times. Survival in the north often depended on community as much as individual effort. Over time, these villages became stable places where generations of families lived and worked together. Children grew up learning the skills they would need as adults. They learned how to farm the fields, they learned how to care for animals, they learned how to sail, fish, and navigate the waters of the fjords. Through these everyday activities, the knowledge of the land passed from one generation to the next. The Viking Age would later become famous for exploration and long voyages. But before those journeys could happen, life began here, in quiet villages beside cold northern waters, in landscapes shaped by mountains, forests, and seas. This land was the foundation of Viking life. It created the environment where their culture developed, and it prepared the people who would eventually travel far beyond the shores of Scandinavia. As we continue our journey into the village, we will begin to look more closely at the homes where these families lived. Because the Longhouse was more than just a shelter. It was the center of Viking family life. A place where work, rest, and storytelling all happened beneath the same roof. In the next chapter, we will step inside one of these homes and discover what daily life looked like within its wooden walls.
Inside the Viking Longhouse. As we move deeper into the Viking village, we arrive at one of the most important places in the settlement, the Longhouse. From the outside, the building appears simple. Its shape is long and slightly curved, with thick wooden walls and a roof that slopes gently down on both sides. The roof is covered with straw or layers of grass and earth, helping protect the home from rain, wind, and snow. Smoke drifts slowly from an opening near the top of the roof. This smoke comes from the fire that burns inside. The Longhouse is not just a shelter. It is the center of family life. Many activities happen here every day. Cooking, eating, sleeping, repairing tools, telling stories, and preparing for the work of the next morning all take place inside these wooden walls. Let us step quietly inside. The first thing we notice is the warmth. Outside, the northern air can often be cold and sharp. But inside the Longhouse, the fire in the center of the room fills the space with gentle heat. The light is soft and golden. The smell of burning wood mixes with the scent of leather, wool, and cooked food. Our eyes slowly adjust to the dim light. The inside of the Longhouse is long and open. There are no separate rooms like in many modern homes. Instead, the space stretches from one end of the building to the other. Along the center of the floor runs a long fire pit. A fire burns here almost all day and night. This fire is carefully watched and maintained. It provides warmth during the cold seasons. It gives light during dark evenings, and it allows food to be cooked for the family. Above the fire, smoke rises slowly toward the roof. Some of it escapes through a small opening, while some spreads gently through the building before drifting outside. Because of this, the inside of the Longhouse often carries a faint smoky scent. But over time, the people living here become used to it. Along the sides of the Longhouse are wooden platforms raised slightly above the floor. These platforms serve many purposes. During the day, people sit here while working, eating, or talking together. At night, these same platforms become sleeping areas. Animal skins, wool blankets, and soft furs are spread across the wood to create warm beds. Families often sleep close together, especially during the long winter months when warmth is important. Near one end of the Longhouse stands a heavy wooden table. Here, meals are prepared and shared. Food in a Viking household was simple but nourishing. Large pots hang over the central fire where soups and stews slowly cook. These meals might contain vegetables such as cabbage, onions, or beans. Fish from the nearby sea is also common. Sometimes meat from sheep, goats, or hunted animals is added. Bread made from barley or other grains may also be served. Cooking often takes time. The food simmers slowly over the fire while people continue their daily tasks. When the meal is ready, the family gathers together. Eating is not rushed. It is a time for conversation and sharing the events of the day. Children might talk about the tasks they helped with. Adults might discuss work that needs to be done tomorrow. The Longhouse is a place where the entire household stays connected. Not far from the fire, tools and everyday objects are carefully stored. Wooden bowls, knives, cooking pots, and simple farming tools are placed along the walls. Each object has its purpose. Nothing is wasted. Everything is used and repaired many times before it is replaced. This careful use of resources is necessary in a land where materials can be difficult to obtain. Throughout the day, different kinds of work take place inside the Longhouse. Women often spin wool into thread using simple spinning tools. This thread is then woven into cloth that can be used to make clothing or blankets. Clothing was usually made from wool or linen. These materials provided warmth and protection against the cold northern climate. Men might repair fishing nets, sharpen tools, or carve wooden objects needed for daily life. Children often help with small tasks. They may gather wood for the fire, carry water, or assist their parents with simple work. Through these activities, children learn the skills they will need when they grow older. Learning happens naturally through observation and practice. As the day continues, the Longhouse remains busy but calm. The fire crackles gently. People move quietly from one task to another. Outside, the sounds of the village continue, as farmers work in the fields and fishermen prepare their boats. But inside the Longhouse, the atmosphere remains steady and warm. When evening arrives, the rhythm of life slowly changes. The outdoor work begins to end. Villagers return to their homes. Inside the Longhouse, the fire grows brighter as more wood is added. The warm glow spreads across the wooden beams and walls. This is often the time when stories are shared. Storytelling was an important tradition in Viking culture. Without books or written records in most homes, stories helped preserve the knowledge of the past. These stories might describe the adventures of heroes, the journeys of explorers, or the actions of the gods from ancient myths. Children listen closely while elders speak. Through these stories, they learn about courage, wisdom, loyalty, and the history of their people. Some stories are exciting, others are thoughtful and quiet, but all of them help strengthen the connection between generations. The Longhouse is the place where these memories live. During the winter months, evenings inside the Longhouse can be long. Outside, snow may cover the ground, cold winds move across the land, but inside, the fire continues to burn steadily. Families sit together, working, talking, and listening to stories while the night slowly passes. This sense of closeness is an important part of village life. Everyone in the household depends on one another. Each person contributes in some way. Over time, the Longhouse becomes more than just a building. It becomes a shared space filled with memories. Children grow up here. Families celebrate important moments here. And during difficult times, the Longhouse provides protection and comfort. From the outside, it may look simple, but inside its wooden walls, the life of the Viking family unfolds day after day. As we step back toward the doorway and look once more across the warm interior, it becomes clear how important this place truly is. The Longhouse is the heart of the household. It is where warmth, work, and family life all come together. Beyond the walls of the house, the village continues to live and grow. Farmers prepare fields, fishermen sail along the coast, traders travel to nearby settlements, and the community works together to prepare for each new season. In the next chapter, we will explore the daily work that fills the lives of the people in this village. Because while stories and traditions are important, survival in the Viking world depends on effort and cooperation. Each day brings tasks that must be completed. Fields must be planted, animals must be cared for, boats must be repaired, and food must be gathered before winter returns. Through this work, the village continues to thrive beside the cold northern sea.
A day of work in the Viking village. Morning arrives quietly in the Viking village. Before the sun fully rises above the mountains and forests, a faint light begins to appear along the horizon. The sky slowly changes from deep blue to soft shades of gray and pale gold. Cool air moves gently across the land. The sea is calm, and the village still rests in silence. Inside the Longhouses, the first signs of movement begin. A fire that burned softly through the night is stirred again. Small pieces of wood are added to bring the flames back to life. Warm light spreads across the wooden walls of the home. Soon the people of the household begin to wake. Life in a Viking village follows the rhythm of daylight. When the sun rises, work begins, and when darkness returns, the village slowly settles back into rest. For the people who live here, each day brings important tasks. These tasks help the entire community survive through every season of the year. Some villagers prepare for work in the fields. Others walk toward the shore to check their fishing boats. Some remain near the houses, caring for animals or preparing tools. Everyone has a role, and together these small efforts keep the village strong. As the sun slowly climbs into the sky, the village becomes more active. Doors open. Footsteps move along the narrow paths between houses. Voices can be heard as neighbors greet one another before beginning their work. Let us first follow the farmers. Just beyond the houses, small fields stretch across the cleared land. These fields were created slowly over many years. Trees were cut down, rocks were removed from the soil, and the land was prepared so crops could grow. Farming in the north is not easy. The growing season is short, and the soil can be difficult to work with. But with patience and care, the villagers grow enough food to support their families. Barley is one of the most important crops. It grows well in the cool climate and can be used in many different ways. Barley can be made into bread. It can be cooked into porridge. It can even be used to brew simple drinks. Other crops such as oats, beans, and vegetables are also planted in these fields. Farmers work slowly but steadily. Using wooden tools and simple plows, they prepare the soil and care for the growing plants. During spring and summer, the fields require daily attention. Weeds must be removed. Plants must be protected from animals. And when harvest time arrives, every hand is needed to gather the crops before cold weather returns. Not far from the fields, another important activity takes place: fishing. For many Viking villages, the sea provides a large portion of their food. Early in the morning, fishermen push their boats gently into the water. The boats glide across the surface of the fjord or open sea. Using nets, hooks, and simple fishing lines, they search for fish beneath the calm waves. Cod, herring, and other fish are common in these northern waters. Fishing requires patience. Sometimes the fishermen wait quietly for long periods. Other times the nets are full and must be pulled in carefully. Once the fish are caught, they are brought back to the village. Some are cooked fresh. Others are dried or salted so they can be stored for the winter months. Fish that are preserved in this way can last for a long time, making them a valuable resource during colder seasons. While farmers and fishermen work outside the village, other tasks continue closer to home.
Animals must be cared for each day. Sheep, goats, and sometimes cattle are kept in small enclosures near the houses. These animals provide milk, wool, and meat. They are an important part of village life. Villagers feed them, guide them to grazing areas, and make sure they are protected from danger. Children often help with these responsibilities. Caring for animals teaches patience and responsibility. It also allows younger members of the village to learn the skills they will need as adults. Nearby, another form of work quietly continues: craftsmanship. Some villagers are skilled at creating tools and objects that everyone depends on. Woodworkers carve bowls, handles, and building materials. Weavers turn wool into cloth for clothing and blankets. And in some villages, a blacksmith works with metal to create tools, knives, and farming equipment. The blacksmith's work is especially important. Inside a small workshop, a fire burns much hotter than the fires found in homes. Metal is heated until it glows bright orange. Then it is carefully shaped using heavy hammers. The sound of metal striking metal echoes softly through the village. Through skill and patience, the blacksmith transforms simple metal into useful tools. These tools help farmers work the land and fishermen repair their boats. Without these crafts, daily life would become much more difficult. As the day continues, the village settles into a steady rhythm. The sun moves slowly across the sky. People work, rest briefly, and then return to their tasks. Sometimes neighbors help one another with larger jobs. Building a new fence, repairing a roof, or harvesting a field may require many hands working together. This cooperation strengthens the bonds within the community. No family lives entirely alone. Each household depends on the support of others. By late afternoon, the work of the day begins to slow. Farmers return from the fields. Fishermen pull their boats back onto the shore. Animals are guided safely into their pens. The village paths grow busy again as people walk back toward their homes. Inside the longhouses, fires are prepared for the evening meal. Cooking begins once more. The smell of warm food drifts gently through the air. Soon, families gather together to eat and talk about the events of the day. Some days are more difficult than others. Storms may damage boats, poor weather may harm the crops. But through cooperation and shared effort, the village continues to endure. After the meal, the pace of life becomes slower. The sun begins to disappear behind distant hills. Golden light spreads across the rooftops of the longhouses. Shadows grow longer across the ground. This is a peaceful moment in the village. The hard work of the day has been completed. People rest beside the fire. Some repair clothing or tools. Others sit quietly and listen to stories told by elders. Children gradually grow tired and prepare for sleep. Outside, the sea reflects the fading colors of the evening sky. Boats rest quietly along the shore. The fields stand calm beneath the cooling air. Slowly, darkness settles over the land. Stars appear above the village, and the steady rhythm of life prepares to begin again when morning returns. Each day in the Viking village may seem simple, but these daily efforts are the foundation of the entire community. Through farming, fishing, craftsmanship, and cooperation, the villagers create a life that allows them to survive in the challenging northern environment. Tomorrow will bring new work and new tasks, and the village will once again awake with the rising sun. In the next chapter, we will explore another important part of Viking life: trade and travel. Because although many villagers spend their days working close to home, the wider world is never very far away. Ships sail across distant waters. Merchants exchange goods between lands, and through these journeys, the Viking world becomes connected to many other cultures. Our story will continue along these pathways of exploration and exchange. Trade and travel in the Viking world. As the Viking village settles into its daily rhythm, it may appear quiet and distant from the rest of the world. Farmers work in their fields, fishermen sail along the nearby waters. Families gather in their homes as evening approaches. But this small village is not isolated. Beyond the calm shoreline and the forests that surround it lies a much larger world. And the people of the Viking Age were deeply connected to that world through travel and trade. The sea was the great pathway that linked distant lands together. Long before modern roads and railways existed, rivers and oceans allowed people to move goods, ideas, and stories across great distances. For the Vikings, travel by water was a natural part of life. The same boats used for fishing and local journeys could also carry travelers far beyond their home village. At the center of this ability to travel was one of the most remarkable creations of the Viking world, the longship. Viking longships were carefully built vessels designed for both strength and speed. They were long and narrow, with curved wooden ends that rose gracefully above the water. Each ship was made from overlapping wooden planks that were shaped and fitted together with great care. This method of construction made the ships strong, but also flexible. They could move smoothly across rough seas and shallow rivers. Unlike many ships of later centuries, Viking longships were light enough to be pulled onto the shore. This meant that sailors could land almost anywhere along the coast. They could also travel along rivers deep into the interior of distant lands. The longship became a powerful tool that allowed Viking sailors to explore and trade across much of Europe and beyond. But not every voyage was about exploration or battle. Many Viking journeys were peaceful trading missions. Merchants traveled between settlements carrying goods that could be exchanged for other valuable items. In this way, villages like the one we are visiting became part of a wide network of trade routes. These routes stretched across the seas and rivers of northern and eastern Europe. Some traders sailed west across the open waters toward the islands of Britain. Others traveled south along rivers that connected to the great cities of the Byzantine Empire and the Middle East. Still others moved eastward across the Baltic Sea toward lands that are now part of modern Russia. Through these journeys, goods from many different cultures moved from one region to another. A Viking trader might leave home carrying furs, animal skins, honey, or iron tools. These items could then be exchanged for silver coins, fine fabrics, glass beads, spices, or other valuable materials. Some goods traveled incredibly long distances before finally reaching a small village in Scandinavia. For example, silk from Asia or silver from distant mines could sometimes be found in Viking markets. These items were rare and highly valued. They showed how connected the Viking world had become to other parts of the globe. Trade was not only about objects, it was also about knowledge. When merchants returned home from distant journeys, they brought stories of the places they had seen. They described new lands, new customs, and new ideas. These stories spread slowly through villages and communities, expanding people's understanding of the wider world. For a young person growing up in a Viking village, these tales of travel could be fascinating. They spoke of great rivers, busy marketplaces, and cities filled with people from many cultures. Some young Vikings would eventually choose to join these journeys themselves. Preparing for a long trading voyage required careful planning. A ship needed a skilled crew. Food and water had to be stored for the journey. Tools and spare materials were carried in case repairs were needed. The sea could be unpredictable, so sailors needed to be ready for changing weather and difficult conditions. Navigation during the Viking Age relied on experience and observation. Sailors watched the movement of the sun and stars. They studied the direction of the wind and the shape of the coastline. They also paid attention to birds and ocean currents. These natural signs helped them understand where they were and which direction they should travel. Over time, Viking sailors became highly skilled navigators. Their knowledge of the sea allowed them to cross large distances with remarkable confidence. When a trading ship finally arrived at another settlement or market town, the atmosphere would often become lively and busy. Merchants displayed their goods. Buyers examined objects carefully before agreeing to exchange them. Languages and accents from many regions could sometimes be heard in these markets. Despite differences in culture, trade allowed people to communicate and cooperate peacefully. For the village we have been visiting, trade provided access to items that could not be produced locally. Glass beads, decorative jewelry, and fine fabrics were often brought back by traders. These items might be used during special occasions or worn by people of higher status within the community. Metal coins and silver were also valuable. They could be stored as wealth or used in future exchanges. The arrival of a trading ship back at the village would often attract attention. People gathered near the shore to see what goods had returned from distant lands. Stories of the journey would soon spread among the villagers. Children listened with curiosity. Adults discussed the news of other regions. Through these connections, even a quiet coastal village remained linked to the broader Viking world. But travel was not always easy. Storms could appear suddenly on the sea. Ships could be damaged by strong waves. Long journeys required courage, patience, and skill. For those who sailed regularly, the sea was both a friend and a challenge. Yet, despite these risks, travel continued to be an important part of Viking culture. It allowed communities to grow stronger through exchange and cooperation. It connected distant lands through shared networks of trade. And it helped spread ideas and traditions across many regions. As the sun begins to set over the village once again, the boats along the shore rest quietly. Some of them may soon carry fishermen into nearby waters. Others may prepare for longer journeys across distant seas. From this peaceful village beside the northern coast, pathways extend far beyond the horizon. Ships will travel along rivers and oceans. Merchants will exchange goods in busy marketplaces. Stories will return home with those who sailed. And through these journeys, the Viking world will remain connected across vast distances. In the next chapter, we will explore another important part of life in the Viking Age: the beliefs and traditions that shaped how people understood the world around them. Because beyond farming, fishing, and travel, the Vikings also carried a rich spiritual culture filled with myths, gods, and ancient stories. These beliefs helped people understand nature, destiny, and their place in the universe. And many of these stories are still remembered today.
Beliefs, gods, and the spiritual world. As evening settles over the Viking village, the pace of daily work slowly fades. Farmers return from the fields. Boats rest quietly along the shore. Smoke rises gently from the roofs of the Longhouses as fires are prepared for the night.
Inside these homes, families gather around the warm light of the central fire. It is often during these quiet moments that stories are shared. Some stories speak of heroes and great journeys. Others tell of the gods who were believed to guide the world. For the people of the Viking Age, the universe was filled with powerful forces. The sea, the sky, the forests, and the storms were not simply parts of nature. They were connected to a spiritual world that shaped how people understood life. These beliefs were passed from one generation to the next through storytelling and tradition. Unlike many later societies, the Vikings did not rely mainly on written books to preserve their beliefs. Instead, their knowledge lived in spoken words. Stories were remembered, repeated, and shared during long evenings beside the fire. Through these stories, children learned about the world and their place within it. At the center of Viking belief were many gods and goddesses. Each one was connected to different parts of life and nature. One of the most well-known gods was Odin. Odin was often seen as a god of wisdom, knowledge, and leadership. According to many stories, Odin traveled across the world in search of understanding. He was believed to watch over warriors, rulers, and poets. Another important figure was Thor. Thor was the god of thunder and storms. In the myths, Thor carried a powerful hammer known as Mjolnir. When thunder echoed across the sky, many believed it was the sound of Thor's hammer striking against unseen forces. Thor was seen as a protector of both gods and humans. Many people wore small hammer-shaped amulets as symbols of protection and strength. Another well-known god was Freya. Freya was connected to fertility, harvest, and peace. Farmers often respected Freya because good harvests depended on the balance of nature. Healthy crops, good weather, and strong animals were all considered blessings that helped the village survive. There were also many goddesses within the Viking spiritual world. One of them was Freya. Freya was associated with beauty, love, and magic. She was also connected to courage and the fate of warriors. Many stories describe her traveling across the sky in a chariot pulled by powerful animals. These gods and goddesses were part of a larger universe that Vikings imagined as a collection of different worlds connected together. At the center of this universe stood a great tree known as Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil was believed to be a massive ash tree whose branches stretched across the heavens while its roots reached deep into many different realms. According to legend, the entire cosmos was supported by this great tree. Different beings lived in the various worlds connected to it. Humans lived in Midgard. The gods lived in Asgard. Other worlds were said to contain giants, mysterious creatures, and powerful forces of nature. Although these stories were symbolic, they helped people understand the complexity of the world around them. The idea that everything was connected through a great cosmic tree reflected the belief that life itself was part of a larger balance. The Vikings also believed that fate played an important role in life. According to their traditions, 3 powerful beings known as the Norns watched over the threads of destiny. These figures were often imagined as weaving the fate of every person. Just as a weaver creates patterns in cloth, the Norns shaped the paths of human lives. This belief encouraged people to face challenges with courage. Even if fate could not be changed, how a person responded to events still mattered.
Courage, honor, and perseverance were highly valued qualities. Religious practices in Viking communities were usually simple and connected to nature. Important ceremonies often took place outdoors rather than inside large buildings. Sacred groves, open fields, or special gathering places were sometimes used for rituals. During certain seasons, communities held celebrations that honored the gods and the changing cycles of the year. These gatherings could include feasts, music, and offerings. Food, drink, or valuable objects might be presented as gifts to the gods in hopes of receiving good fortune in return. For example, before an important journey at sea, sailors might ask the gods for protection. Farmers might offer thanks for a successful harvest. These practices created a sense of connection between people and the forces they believed shaped their lives. Spiritual beliefs were not separated from everyday life. They were woven into daily routines and seasonal traditions. A small carved symbol placed inside a home might represent protection. A special necklace might carry meaning connected to a particular god. Even simple gestures, such as offering thanks for good weather, reflected these traditions. Stories also played an important role in preserving the spiritual culture of the Vikings. Many myths described the adventures of the gods. These tales often contained lessons about bravery, wisdom, and humility. Some stories explained natural events. Thunderstorms, changing seasons, and the movement of the stars were all understood through mythological narratives. One of the most famous legends told of a future event known as Ragnarok. According to this myth, Ragnarok would be a great battle that would eventually lead to the destruction and renewal of the world. Although the story described conflict and change, it also spoke of renewal and the continuation of life after difficult times. For many people, this story symbolized the cycles of nature. Just as winter is followed by spring, destruction can be followed by new beginnings. While these beliefs shaped how Vikings understood the universe, daily life in the village remained grounded in practical work and community cooperation. People farmed their land, cared for animals, built ships, and raised families. But the stories of the gods and the great tree of the universe remained quietly present in their thoughts. These beliefs gave meaning to the challenges of life. They reminded people that their struggles and achievements were part of a larger story. As evening deepens over the village, the fire inside the longhouse burns softly. Outside, the sky is filled with stars. For the people of the Viking Age, these stars were more than distant lights. They were part of the vast and mysterious universe that their stories tried to understand. Listening to these tales beside the fire, children slowly drift toward sleep, while elders continue speaking in calm voices. The stories travel through generations, connecting the past with the present. In the next chapter, we will explore another important part of Viking life, family and community. Because while gods and myths shaped how people understood the universe, it was the strength of families and neighbors that allowed villages like this one to endure through many generations. And within these families, traditions, knowledge, and skills were carefully passed from parents to children.
Family and community life. As night passes and a new day slowly begins, life in the Viking village once again moves into its familiar rhythm. The quiet settlement by the northern sea may appear small, but within it lives a strong and connected community. At the heart of this community are families. Family life was one of the most important parts of the Viking world. Every village was made up of households that worked together to survive the changing seasons of the north. Inside each longhouse lived not only parents and children, but often several generations of relatives. Grandparents, cousins, and other family members sometimes shared the same home. Living together in this way created strong bonds between people. Everyone depended on one another. Each person had responsibilities that helped support the household. This cooperation allowed families to endure the long winters and the hard work of farming and fishing. In the early morning, when the first light of the sun touches the rooftops of the longhouses, the household begins to wake. The fire is stirred and fresh wood is added. Soon the warm glow spreads through the room once again. Parents prepare for the work of the day, while children begin to help with smaller tasks. From a young age, children in a Viking village learned practical skills. Boys and girls both helped their families in different ways. Some gathered firewood. Others carried water from nearby streams. Older children might help care for animals or assist in the fields. Through these everyday activities, young people slowly learned the knowledge that would guide them as adults. Education in the Viking world did not take place in classrooms. Instead, it happened through observation and experience. Children watched their parents and elders closely. They listened to instructions and practiced tasks many times. Over the years, these lessons became natural skills. A boy might learn how to build a boat or repair fishing nets. A girl might learn weaving, cooking, and managing the household. But in reality, many tasks were shared. Survival in the north required flexibility and cooperation. While families formed the foundation of daily life, the village itself was also an important support system. Neighbors often helped each other with larger tasks. When a house needed repairs, several families might gather to help rebuild a wall or replace part of a roof. During harvest season, the entire community sometimes worked together to gather crops before the weather changed. This cooperation strengthened relationships between households. People understood that helping others today might mean receiving help tomorrow. Trust and mutual respect allowed villages to function smoothly. In addition to daily work, communities also gathered for important meetings and decisions. These gatherings allowed people to discuss problems, settle disagreements, and organize shared activities. In Viking society, discussions about laws and conflicts were often handled through assemblies. At these gatherings, respected members of the community would listen to different viewpoints and help find solutions. This system helped maintain order without the need for large government structures. Respect for tradition and fairness played an important role in keeping peace within the village. Marriage was another important part of family life. Marriage often created connections between different families. These relationships helped strengthen the village as a whole. When two people married, their households became linked through cooperation and shared responsibility. Weddings were important celebrations. Friends and relatives gathered to share food, music, and stories. These gatherings could last many hours and sometimes even several days. During these moments, the entire community celebrated together. Children born into the village were welcomed as new members of the community. Their arrival brought hope for the future. Each new generation carried the traditions and knowledge of the past. Parents and elders carefully passed these lessons forward. Names given to children often carried meaning. Sometimes they honored ancestors or reflected qualities that families hoped the child would develop. As children grew older, they slowly gained more responsibility. Teenagers might begin learning advanced skills such as sailing,
crafting tools, or managing animals. They also listened to stories about distant lands and heroic journeys. These stories helped shape their understanding of courage, honor, and responsibility. While daily life involved hard work, it also included moments of rest and celebration. Seasonal festivals provided opportunities for the entire village to gather and relax. These festivals often marked important times of the year, such as the arrival of spring or the end of the harvest. During these celebrations, people shared meals, played music, and told stories. Food and drink were enjoyed in larger quantities than usual. Laughter and conversation filled the Longhouses. For a short time, the worries of daily labor faded into the background. Music also played a role in community life. Simple instruments such as flutes, drums, and stringed instruments were sometimes used during gatherings. Songs could tell stories of heroes, describe journeys across the sea, or simply celebrate friendship and family. These shared experiences strengthened the sense of belonging within the village. Life in a Viking community was not always easy. Storms could damage crops. Harsh winters could make food supplies limited. Illness or injury could affect members of the household. In difficult times, the support of family and neighbors became even more important. People helped care for the sick. Food might be shared with those who needed it most. In this way, cooperation helped communities survive even when circumstances became challenging. Respect for elders was also an important part of Viking culture. Older members of the community carried valuable knowledge gained through years of experience. They remembered past events, seasonal patterns, and traditional practices. Their advice was often sought when decisions needed to be made. Children listened carefully to the stories and guidance offered by their grandparents. Through these conversations, wisdom passed quietly from one generation to the next. As evening approaches once again, the village begins to grow quiet. Families return to their homes after completing the tasks of the day. The warm glow of fires appears through the doorways of longhouses. Inside, people gather for their evening meals. Children sit beside their parents while elders share stories of earlier times. Outside, the sky slowly darkens. Stars begin to appear above the peaceful settlement. From a distance, the village seems calm and steady. Within its homes live families connected by trust, cooperation, and shared history. These relationships form the true strength of the community. Without strong families and supportive neighbors, life in the north would be far more difficult. But together, the people of the village create a stable and enduring way of life. Their traditions continue from one generation to the next. Their stories remain alive in memory and conversation, and their daily efforts ensure that the village will continue to thrive beside the northern sea. In the next chapter, we will explore another fascinating aspect of Viking life: the ships that carried them across rivers and oceans. Because while families and communities formed the foundation of the Viking world, their remarkable ships allowed them to travel far beyond their home villages. These vessels would carry sailors to distant lands, shaping the history of the Viking Age.
The ships of the Vikings. Along the quiet shoreline of the Viking village, several wooden boats rest gently on the sand. The tide moves slowly in and out, touching the edges of the hulls before returning to the open sea. At first glance, these boats may appear simple, but in reality, they represent one of the most remarkable achievements of the Viking world. The ships of the Vikings allowed them to travel farther than most people of their time. Through these vessels, distant lands became connected across rivers, seas, and oceans. The story of Viking travel begins with the forests. Scandinavia was covered with vast woodlands filled with tall trees. Oak, pine, and other strong woods grew across the landscape. These trees provided the material needed to build homes, tools, and ships. Among the villagers were skilled craftsmen who understood how to transform raw wood into powerful vessels. Shipbuilding was a careful process that required patience and knowledge. Each ship began with the selection of the right trees. Builders searched for wood that was strong, flexible, and free from major flaws. Once the trees were cut, the wood was shaped into long planks. These planks were then carefully fitted together to create the hull of the ship. Unlike many later ships, Viking vessels used a special construction method. The wooden planks overlapped slightly along the sides of the hull. This design is often called clinker construction. It allowed the ship to be both strong and flexible. When waves struck the sides of the vessel, the wood could bend slightly without breaking. This flexibility helped the ship survive rough waters. Another important feature of Viking ships was their shape. They were long and narrow, with both ends curved upward. This design helped the ship move smoothly through the water. It also allowed the vessel to change direction quickly when needed. Many ships were equipped with both sails and oars. The sail allowed the wind to carry the ship across long distances. The oars gave sailors control when the wind was calm or when traveling along narrow rivers. A single ship might carry many crew members who worked together to row when necessary. The teamwork required to operate a ship created strong bonds between sailors. For many Vikings, the sea was both a path and a challenge. Sailing across open water required courage and skill. Weather conditions could change quickly. Strong winds and storms sometimes appeared without warning. Yet Viking sailors developed a deep understanding of the sea. They learned how to read the movement of waves. They watched the patterns of clouds in the sky. They observed birds and ocean currents. These natural signs helped guide them during long journeys. Some ships were built mainly for trade and travel. These vessels carried goods such as furs, iron tools, honey, and other valuable items. Merchants sailed between settlements and markets, exchanging products from different regions. Other ships were designed for speed and exploration. These vessels were light and fast, able to cross great distances in relatively short periods. The most famous of these ships are often called longships. Longships were capable of traveling across both oceans and rivers. Their shallow draft meant they did not sink deeply into the water. This allowed them to sail into shallow areas and even move along narrow rivers far from the coast. Because of this design, Viking sailors could travel deep into the interior of other lands. They could reach villages and trading centers that were far from the sea. For the people living in the Viking village, ships were more than just tools. They were symbols of possibility and connection. A ship resting on the shore might soon carry sailors across distant waters. It might return with goods from foreign lands or stories of unfamiliar places. Children growing up near the coast often watched the ships with curiosity. Some dreamed of sailing on them one day. Others helped with small tasks such as cleaning the decks or carrying supplies. These early experiences helped prepare future sailors. Building and maintaining ships required cooperation within the community. Several craftsmen might work together on a single vessel. One person shaped wooden planks. Another carved decorative details along the prow. Others prepared ropes, sails, and wooden oars. When the ship was finally complete, launching it into the water was often an important moment. Villagers gathered along the shore to watch as the vessel touched the sea for the first time. The ship would then begin its life as part of the village's connection to the wider world. Ships also played a role in Viking ceremonies and traditions. In some cases, important individuals were buried in ships along with personal objects and treasures. These burial sites reflected the belief that ships could carry the spirit of the departed on a final journey. Although these practices were not common for every person, they show how deeply ships were respected in Viking culture. As the sun slowly moves across the sky, the boats along the shore continue to rest quietly. Their wooden surfaces reflect the soft light of the afternoon. Some fishermen prepare their vessels for short trips along the nearby coast. Others repair sails or check the ropes that secure the mast. Each ship requires regular care to remain strong and reliable. Salt water, wind, and constant movement can slowly wear down wood and rope. Maintenance becomes part of daily life for those who depend on the sea. When evening approaches, the shoreline becomes peaceful once again. The tide gently reaches the sand before slowly pulling back. The ships remain ready for future journeys. From this small village beside the northern waters, sailors may travel to distant lands. They may follow rivers that stretch across continents. They may cross seas that lead to unfamiliar shores. Through these journeys, Viking ships helped shape the connections between many cultures. The vessels built from the forests of Scandinavia carried not only goods and travelers, but also ideas and traditions. In many ways, the ships of the Vikings were bridges between worlds. As darkness begins to fall and the stars appear above the quiet village, the boats remain still along the coast. But their presence reminds us that even the most peaceful settlement can be connected to faraway places. In the next chapter, we will explore how the seasons shaped life in the Viking village. Because the changing rhythm of the year influenced everything from farming and fishing to celebrations and preparation for the long northern winter. Understanding these seasonal cycles will reveal how carefully Viking communities planned their lives around the natural world.
The changing seasons. This allowed food to remain usable for many months. Autumn was also the time when villagers prepared their homes for the cold season ahead. Firewood was gathered and stacked near the houses. Roofs were checked for weak places. Clothing made from wool and fur was prepared for the colder weather. Animals were brought closer to the village and given shelter. Every preparation helped ensure that families would remain warm and safe during the winter. Despite the hard work of harvest season, autumn could also be a time of celebration. Once the crops were safely stored, villages sometimes held gatherings to mark the end of the growing season. Food was shared, stories were told, and music filled the longhouses. These moments allowed people to relax after months of effort. Soon, however, the air began to change. The days became shorter. Cool winds moved down from the mountains and across the sea. Winter slowly approached. Winter in the Viking world was long and often difficult. Snow covered the fields. The sea sometimes froze near the shore. Travel became more limited. Fishing and farming slowed down as the cold weather made outdoor work harder. During winter, much of daily life moved inside the longhouses.
The central fire burned almost constantly. Families gathered together in the warm light of the flames. Although winter reduced outdoor activity, it was not a time of complete rest. Many forms of work continued inside the home. Tools were repaired. Clothing was sewn or woven. Wooden objects were carved. These indoor activities helped prepare the household for the coming year. Winter evenings were also the perfect time for storytelling. With darkness arriving early, families spent many hours together beside the fire. Elders told stories of gods, heroes, and journeys across distant seas. These stories helped preserve the traditions and knowledge of the community. Children listened closely, imagining the adventures described in the tales. Through these moments, history and culture were passed from one generation to the next. Winter also encouraged reflection. The quiet landscape outside the village created a sense of stillness. Snow covered the forests and hills. The sea moved slowly under the pale winter sky. For the people of the village, this calm period offered time to rest and prepare mentally for the coming spring. In this way, the year in a Viking village followed a natural cycle. Spring brought new beginnings. Summer offered growth and opportunity. Autumn required careful preparation and harvest. Winter encouraged rest, storytelling, and reflection. Each season depended on the work completed during the previous one. If crops were planted well in spring, the harvest would be stronger in autumn. If food was preserved properly in autumn, the winter months would be easier. This connection between seasons created a deep respect for nature. People learned to watch the land closely. They noticed changes in weather patterns. They observed animals and plants for signs of coming seasons. These observations helped guide important decisions. Over time, this knowledge became part of the traditions passed through families and communities. As the year slowly moves forward once again, the village remains steady beside the northern sea. The seasons continue their quiet rhythm. Snow melts. Crops grow. Leaves fall. And winter returns again. Through patience, cooperation, and careful planning, the people of the Viking village adapt to these changes year after year. Their lives move in harmony with the natural world around them. And within this steady rhythm, the traditions of the Viking Age continue to endure. In the next chapter, we will reflect on the lasting influence of these communities. Because although the Viking Age eventually came to an end, the legacy of these people and their way of life continued to shape history long after their villages faded into the past.
Evening in the Viking village. As the day slowly comes to an end, a gentle calm settles over the Viking village. The sun begins to move lower in the sky, casting a warm golden light across the land. Long shadows stretch over the grass and along the wooden houses that stand near the shore. The busy sounds of the day gradually grow softer. Farmers return from the fields. Fishermen guide their boats back toward the beach. Children who spent the afternoon playing near the forests or along the shoreline begin to make their way home. The village slowly prepares for the quiet hours of evening. Along the coast, small waves move gently against the sand. Boats that traveled during the day are pulled slightly higher onto the shore. The wooden hulls rest peacefully after hours on the water. Some fishermen clean their nets, while others carry baskets filled with the day's catch. Fish will soon be prepared for the evening meal.
Nearby, smoke begins to rise slowly from the roofs of several longhouses. Inside these homes, fires are being lit in the central hearth. The warm glow of firelight spreads across the wooden walls. The smell of cooking food begins to drift through the cool evening air. Meals in a Viking village were often simple but nourishing. Stews made from vegetables, grains, and sometimes fish or meat simmer over the fire. Bread baked from barley or other grains may be shared among the family. These meals provide comfort after a long day of work. Inside the longhouses, family members gather together around the fire. The central hearth becomes the heart of the home. The flames provide warmth, light, and a place where people can talk and relax. After the busy hours of the day, evening offers a moment of rest. Tools are placed aside. Hands that worked in the fields or on fishing boats can finally relax. Some people continue light tasks while sitting near the fire. Clothing may be repaired. Ropes might be braided. Pieces of wood could be carved into simple tools or decorations. These quiet activities fill the evening hours while allowing families to remain together. Children sit close to their parents, sometimes listening carefully as elders begin to share stories. Storytelling was an important part of life in Viking communities. Without books or written stories for most people, history and traditions were remembered through spoken words. Elders told tales about brave heroes, distant journeys, and the powerful gods believed to guide the world. These stories were passed from generation to generation. Through them, children learned about courage, wisdom, and the values of their community. The warm firelight flickers gently as voices fill the longhouse. Outside, the sky slowly changes color. The golden tones of sunset fade into deeper shades of orange and purple. Birds return to their nests. The forests become quieter. Only the distant sound of the sea remains constant as waves move slowly across the darkening water. As night approaches, the village grows calmer. Many villagers step outside their homes for a moment before sleep. They look toward the open sky above the sea. In northern regions, the night sky can be clear and full of stars. Without the bright lights of modern cities, the stars appear sharp and bright. For the people of the Viking Age, the sky often felt vast and mysterious. The stars were not just beautiful to look at, they also helped sailors navigate across open water during long journeys. Some villagers might quietly observe the constellations, recognizing familiar patterns that guided travelers across the sea. Evening was also a time when travelers might arrive at the village. Visitors from nearby settlements or distant regions sometimes reached the village at the end of the day. Hospitality was an important tradition in Viking culture. Guests were often welcomed inside the longhouse and offered food and warmth by the fire. In return, travelers brought news from other places. They shared stories about events happening beyond the village. These conversations helped people feel connected to the wider world. But on most evenings, the village remained peaceful and quiet. Families stayed together inside their homes. The steady crackling of firewood filled the air. Warm light flickered against wooden beams and simple furniture. Gradually, the tiredness from the day's work began to settle in. Children were often the first to grow sleepy. After listening to stories or watching the flames dance in the hearth, they slowly drifted toward sleep.
Parents prepared sleeping areas using blankets made from wool or animal skins. The warmth of the fire helped keep the longhouse comfortable during the cool northern nights. Before resting, some villagers stepped outside once more. The village now lay in near silence. The sea reflected the pale light of the moon. Boats rested quietly along the shore. The forests surrounding the village stood still beneath the dark sky. It was in moments like this that the rhythm of life in the Viking world felt most peaceful. Days were filled with work and effort, but evenings allowed people to pause and breathe. The calm hours of night reminded them that life was not only about survival, but also about community and shared moments. Over many generations, evenings like these shaped the memories of the Viking people. Although centuries have passed since the Viking Age, we can still imagine these quiet moments beside the sea. A small village resting under the stars. Families gathered around warm fires. Stories being told in gentle voices. And the soft sound of waves moving across the dark northern waters. As our journey through the Viking village comes to an end, we leave this peaceful evening behind. The fires slowly fade. The stars continue their silent movement across the sky. And the village rests quietly, waiting for the first light of a new day.
As the quiet night settles over the Viking village, the last sounds of the day slowly fade away. The fires inside the longhouses burn softly, giving a warm glow to the wooden walls. Outside, the sea moves gently under the moonlight. The boats rest peacefully along the shore. Above the village, the night sky stretches wide and silent, filled with distant stars. The people of the village sleep, resting after a long day of work, travel, and shared stories. And as the hours of the night pass quietly, the rhythm of life continues, just as it has for generations. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey through a Viking village. If you enjoyed this calm exploration of history, you may wish to subscribe and return for more quiet stories from the past. Together, we will continue to visit ancient worlds, forgotten places, and the daily lives of people who lived many centuries ago. For now, allow the calm of this village to stay with you. Let your thoughts slow down. Let the quiet of the night surround you, and drift gently into rest. Good night.